The Guangzhou Charge. Now, interesting to note here is that Hopper, Fraggy, and Bishu are actually free agents. But the reason for that is probably because their previous contracts have expired. So it's the same situation as we saw with with Note here, where his original 2018 contract has expired. That's the same situation that the Guangzhou Charge find themselves in, where Bishu, his original contract with the Gladiators that got traded to Charge, has expired, and Fraggy and Hopper, their original 2018 contracts that got traded to the Charge from the Fusion, have also expired. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Charge are going to send them away. The Charge could totally just re-sign them for next year and be fine with that. Now, whether or not these players want to move to China, who knows? And it's pretty wise that these players didn't renegotiate their contracts for longer if they are worried about moving to China, you know, because say you're Hopper and you move to Guangzhou Charge at the beginning of this year, they probably asked if he wanted to renegotiate his contract, you know. They want to lock him down for 2 years, something like that, and pay him a bit more. You get like a 10 grand raise, but you are locked into your contract for the next 2 years. Hopper's like, nah, fam, I'll feel it out. I'll see how good this team is. And then, you know, I'll be a free agent at the end of this year and you can come at me with an offer then. This is the kind of thinking that should go into people like Hopper when they know that their contract is about to expire on the horizon. Now, if Hopper wanted to renegotiate his contract with the Charge and sign back to this team, he will probably get a raise anyway because Hopper was successful. It's obviously always a risk involved, right? Because you don't know whether you're going to be successful. Hopper can't know at the beginning of 2019 whether his stock is going to increase or decrease, but it turns out that it did increase fairly significantly, I would say. So Hopper is probably in for a bit of a payday coming into 2020, assuming that he wants to go with the Guangzhou Charge. There are also other players that are on team option, like Nero, for example, that I would heavily expect them to try and lock down. And, you know, there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to. Is a team option. The Guangzhou Charge can choose whether or not to keep him on for the next year. So yeah, the Guangzhou Charge in an interesting position where some people are under longer contracts, but some people are on team options. I'm not 100% sure why like Rio is on a longer contract, whereas Shu's on a team option, for example. I don't really know. Don't have any insight into that situation, but it's the interesting thing about the Guangzhou Charge to point out for fans, I think, is that don't worry about Fraggy, Hopper, and Bishu. They could end up as just floating free agents. They could end up being traded to another team, but it's also eminently possible that they might just get re-signed by the Guangzhou Charge for an increased amount of salary and lock them down for a couple of years. All right, let's look at the Hangzhou Spark. Oh, actually, the Hangzhou Spark don't really have anything interesting going on, apart from the fact that for some reason they have never announced that Zijin is on their team. This Chinese tank, Chinese off-tank, who performed very well in contenders. They didn't. Oh yeah, Crystal under contract. But the weird thing about that is, I think they're currently like suing Crystal or something to get out of his contract. You know, because here's the thing: like, Crystal is guaranteed contract for like 2019 and 2020, but Crystal was allegedly, according to the Hangzhou Spark, being an absolute prick and refusing to play for them. So they're suing Crystal to get out of paying him. So you can see, like, if you are under contract, imagine this was like, let's use Mickey. Imagine this was Mickey, and he's not a prick, but you just don't want to pay him anymore, right? Crystal has given them a reason to break contract. They can sue and they can say, Crystal violated his contract by not coming and playing back for us. We are terminating this contract. We're not paying Crystal anymore. But for Mickey, they've got no argument. I mean, if they want the guy to play, he would come and play. But they just don't want him to play. It's just a mascot that's hanging around. So they still just have to keep paying out his contract. So yeah, Mickey Smart. Mickey Smart, Dallas Boo-Boo Brain. By the look of it, from what we can see from the outside. There might be more stuff involved. You know, maybe it comes out that the Dallas Fuel actually are geniuses and they orchestrated this the entire time and there's some nefarious plan going on and they end up winning the 2020 season. But somehow, I think not. But yeah, so this article just, I guess, announced the fact that Zijin is on the team. And these are the kind of players that you would really want to pursue if you're the Chengdu Hunters, in my opinion. But okay, I mean, you know, you have Mandarin-speaking Gushui on the team. So opportunities to integrate other Mandarin speakers into the team as well. All right, so let's move on. Houston Outlaws, because Houston are not a dumpster fire like the Dallas Fuel. But they did not have a successful season. They didn't have a very successful 2018 season either, but they've always been kind of somewhat in the running. I wouldn't say they were really in the running for playoffs this year, but they were pretty close last year. They were very close last year, and they theoretically could have made the playoffs this year as well if a few things had gone better for them. The big problem with the Houston Outlaws, though, and the thing that you have to keep in mind, is that they didn't have an owner for the 2019 season. So things were just fucked across the board. Like, it's so unfair to judge Houston Outlaws in the same way that you judge other teams with how they were run in 2019, because they just didn't have the support from like a management staff perspective. But let's take a look at what they had for the contracts. Now, the interesting thing to point out immediately is that Arhan, Boink, and Bani did not renegotiate their contracts in 2018. So these guys were all signed in 2018, as far as I can remember. Arhan was signed in 2018 at the end of it, right? Maybe Dante. Was Dante not signed in 2018? No, I think Dante was signed in the offseason, right? Anyway, the point is, in the 2018 season, you could only give players 1+1 contracts, as far as I'm aware. I think the Overwatch League announced this a while back. So Bani and Boink, for sure, I'll talk about them specifically because Arhan, I think, got picked up halfway through the season. Those guys were on 1+1 contracts for the first year. But they didn't, whereas other people, like Coolmat, renegotiated his contract at the beginning of 2019, Bani and Boink did not renegotiate their contracts at the beginning of 2019. They just allowed them to, they allowed the Houston Outlaws to pick up their option for 2019, and they are now free agents, or they will be on the 7th. What does that mean, though? Because for certain players like Carpe, for example, I would imagine that the decision to become a free agent was his. He decided not to renegotiate because he thinks that he'll get a payday at the end of this season. Psychoshiro09, thank you for the sub. Thank you very much. So let's use that example again. Let me reiterate that example. So for some players who were very, very successful in 2018, they chose not to renegotiate in 2019 because they knew that being a free agent allows lots of different teams to bid on you, and your salary could potentially go very, very high for the 2020 and 2021 seasons. But for players like Bani and Boink, where they're not all-star players, and for Arhan as well, it seems more likely to me that the Houston Outlaws didn't want to renegotiate salaries. They didn't want to extend their salaries. So the Houston Outlaws could re-sign these guys for 2020, but why didn't they at the beginning of this year? If they wanted them for 2020, why didn't they at the beginning? I don't know what the reason is, but it might hint towards the kind of, you could draw a reasonable assumption from looking at this that they valued people like Spree, Raucus, Muma, Linkser, Jake more so than they did Arhan, Bani, and Boink. And that might then be an indication that these guys will not be on the Houston Outlaws next year. There's a lot of assumptions and speculation involved in that line of thinking, but that's what it kind of hints to me. They might have also just been banking on the fact that they didn't know how good Bani and Boink were going to be, so they didn't want to extend their contracts, but actually they were happy with how Bani and Boink performed, and so they do want to re-sign them. So that is also still very possible. No need to panic if you're a fan of Bani and Boink on the Houston Outlaws, but I mean, let's be real. It does seem like Houston Outlaws need to make some changes anyway. So what can we drag from the rest of it as well? It is strange that some of these players are under contract for the 2020 season because the team was pretty garbage, and I think they'll struggle to trade these players if they do want to get rid of them. Let's use Raucus as an example, because of the 5 that I highlighted there that are under contract, I think you could make a good argument for Jake being on a long contract because he's kind of like the face of it, insanely marketable. You peddle him out to all of these news organizations and stuff as well. You get your value from Jake, and he's also a pretty decent player. This season he was all right. You know, his brig wasn't that great, but he had moments where he was okay, you know, within the margins of what you would expect from him. Linkser has shown flashes of brilliance in 2018. Didn't really show anything in 2019, but okay, the meta wasn't good for them, and also, you know, the team was going through a lot of shit during that season. Muma, again, similar kind of stuff. Raucus is the player that attracts a lot of criticism towards him for his for his performance. And when I watch the games, I'm often thinking, Raucus, what the fuck are you doing? He doesn't seem like the most skilled flex support in the league. So I'm going to use him as an example. If you want to make an upgrade at the... Actually, no, I've got a better example. Both of your off-tanks are under contract, Coolmat and Spree. Both of these off-tanks could arguably... You could make very strong arguments that these were among the bottom 5 off-tanks in the league this year. I think that. And I don't think that's too much of a stretch. Now, I'm sure they would disagree with me. And I'm sure Houston Outlaws fans would disagree with me as well. But I would say that these two players did not particularly impress this season. And didn't impress that much last season either. Although Coolmat did have occasions where he looked like he was playing very well at the beginning of the season in 2018. But say you want an upgrade on the off-tank position. Both of your off-tanks are under contract, so you want to trade one of them to another team to free up some budget, free up some space. Who's going to pick these guys up? Who's going to accept that trade? Because then they have to pay those contracts. I think you would really struggle to trade any of these players apart from Jake. I think Jake is a very valuable player because he brings a lot outside of the game. He can really carry a franchise with his... personality and speaking, and does incredibly well in interviews and stuff like that. I think, honestly, you would struggle to trade any of these other players. And so having them under guaranteed contract is quite interesting because it kind of limits the ways that the Houston Outlaws can adjust for next season. Do I think it's going to be a problem, though? No, because I don't expect the Houston Outlaws to make many changes for next season. Why? Because they're trying to be popular. They're not trying to be good. The Houston Outlaws, as a team, want marketability. They want Western players, specifically American players if they can, and they want to be a popular team. Are they succeeding at that? You goddamn right they are. Yeah, they are one of the most popular teams in the league, even though they hover around mid-table pretty consistently and had a completely winless stage this year. They're still doing all right.